Justin Nault here. I am extremely excited about my guest today because we're going to venture away from the land of fitness and nutrition for a little while, and we're going to talk about all things personal finance. My guest today is Garrett Gunderson. He is the founder of Wealth Factory and a best-selling author and all-around financial genius. There's two phrases you use, and I want to make sure I have them both correct as well. Can you talk about the idea of financial independence versus financial freedom? Those are two different things, right?
Yes, two different things. And let me just say this about what you mentioned with your dad.
Okay.
Financial independence, financial freedom. If we define value, right? If we define value as a measure, as a three measures of worth, or we just look at value as like, what is it? And money is just evidence of value. What if money is just evidence of value?
Sure.
Like value is an amazing thing. If money is merely evidence of value 95% of the time, then people with money have created value. Now, because of cronyism, because of politics, because of abusive capitalism, then we look at the exception to the rule and then say, I don't want money to ruin me. I want to be a good person, and therefore I don't want to be rich. And so that kind of notion comes up, but I'm like, wait. When I see someone wealthy, the benefit of the doubt is they've impacted the world in a very positive way. Now, that 5% of people that are doing illegal, deceptive, coercive, abuse, like all those things, I get they exist, but they're not the rule. The news makes us believe that they are.
Yeah.
More people are employed by small businesses than by major corporations. When we hear of most wrongdoing, it's overwhelmingly major corporations. Not Absolutely. That it's immune with small companies, but it's overwhelming. And so I think that we have to really recognize that money is stored value. And that if you've created value, I get that you could marry into it. I get that you could win the lottery. It's usually fleeting, or that you might be part of the lucky sperm club and inherit it. But ultimately, it means that someone did something of a significant and substantial value. If you look at the world from that lens, then you can let go of jealousy, envy, frustration, and instead go, well, what could I learn? What did they do? And you can see them in a different place. Now, financial independence is when you have enough cash flow to cover our basic expenses. That cash flow should come from one of two sources or both. Assets that produce cash flow, or entrepreneurial income, which is income that comes in if we don't open a computer or show up to an office, right? It's just income that comes in because of infrastructure that we built. When that covers our basic expenses, we're financially independent. Financial freedom goes back to that state of mind where money is no longer the primary reason or excuse why we would do or not do anything. So financial freedom is a state of being. Financial independence is a state of having because of our assets. So they're both just extraordinarily valuable, but people can become financially free like that. Now, maybe it's not that easy, but they can make the choice.
Sure.
And have a paradigm shift. Whereas financial independence requires, a little bit more cooperation and intention and action to create specific cash flow from assets.
Sure. This was huge for me in the onboarding process of Wealth Factory because we went through all of my expenses, including like lifestyle expenses, productive and protective expenses, things that I want to do to keep up with my current lifestyle. And I was blown away by this, man. And the crazy thing is a lot of my people that have seen my social media and everything, it's like, I went to 8 different countries just in 2019. I lived in Thailand. Like I have a functional medicine doctor who's ridiculously expensive. I see a therapist every week. I train martial arts, like constant experiences and investment in myself. And then I go through these numbers with Tim from Wealth Factory and I'm looking and he was like, dude, for you to live the exact lifestyle you're living, like organic, grass-fed, everything, groceries, everything, all my favorite things, $5,300 a month. It literally blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute, are you serious? Like, because my cost of living is crazy low. I've made some good investments along the way. And he was just like, yeah, that's it. Now in my head, I had this thing of like, I have to be rich. I must be rich so I can live the lifestyle I want. The next thing I know, I'm taking coaching calls with people for nutrition, fitness, whatever. And they're talking about how their finances are such a big stressor. They don't want to buy these nutritional supplements or whatever. And then we get really candid and it blows their mind that they find out I make far less money than they do. And it's just complete mind blown for them. But the difference is I have 10x the freedom that they have. So it's two different things. So that's what when I hear that word freedom, but I was just blown away by how little it is. And that goes back to self-awareness. All my excuses, I must be rich, went out the window. Like $5,300 a month, I can do that,
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty awesome share. And if you just I think that the world has us stuck in activity and consumption. If I just work harder, I can buy more of the things that I want. And then people buy things they don't even want. Then they have to be more active to pay for those because it creates some level of debt. And ultimately, it's because a lot of people haven't sat down and said what it's important to them. What do they want? And when I ask that to a lot of people, like, I want to get out of debt. I'm like, that's not really a want. That's like, okay, you want to, but what got you there in the first place? And if money weren't a concern, what would you do with your life? And a lot of people haven't ever answered that question. And until they answer that question, like, I think that people just don't feel worthy of spending that money on themselves.
Yeah.
Like, you feel worthy to spend that money on yourself.
Absolutely.
Like, I've dealt with this with my wife, like now she hired this awesome guy, Kyle, that he's on Skype and he trains her, tells her what to do in the gym, but then they also do like EFT, emotional freedom technique. And they talk about, overall like she takes pictures of her food, but it's not too constraining, but it's like, that's been a phenomenal thing for her, but she wouldn't spend money even on a gym pass before. And I'm like,
yeah,
I don't even care. Like, whatever it is. She's like, oh, right. Pilates is expensive. I'm like, what do you like for us? What? but it's that like worthiness. Like, are you willing to invest in yourself?
Dude, it's so hard for me to get people to understand the concept that you teach of like, make yourself the number one investment. I shared this today in the Clovis Academy, my private Facebook group, because there was a story of a girl, 25-year-old girl who makes 150 grand a year on Fiverr, doing $5 to $15 gigs on Fiverr. So I'm talking to people and it becomes this thing of like, somehow $250,000 of student loan debt is like perfectly acceptable in our society. But then I'll show somebody like, hey, you can take this Facebook ads masterclass for $97 and it's like on a ClickFunnels page. And they're like, oh, I can't spend money on that. I'm like, do you understand how much better this will do for you in a marketplace, understanding Facebook ads versus like your philosophy degree or whatever you got for $200K?
Dude, when I went to college, one, how ridiculous are general education classes?
Insane.
Like, let's just waste your time.
Yes.
On stuff that will be meaningless in your life. But I took a nutrition class, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I was in college. I wouldn't say my nutrition was dialed in. I talked to my cousin who was super buff and was a running back. He's like, I eat pasta and tuna fish sandwiches. All right. So I was just like filling myself full of mercury and carbs. But I was working out pretty hard, but then I go take some creatine. I start bulking up. And then I go to that nutrition class. She goes, creatine does nothing. I'm like, well, later on, I'm like, at least makes you retain water at a minimum. It does something.
Sure.
And then she just espoused the food pyramid like it was the only answer to everything. I'm like, and I'm paying a huge amount of money. And, where I could actually now pay for a nutritionist, I could pay for all sorts of advice for a lot less money, a lot less time, and a lot more result. But but somehow this paper degree,
Right. That's it.
It's kind of like Napoleon Bonaparte saying, hey, my life changed when I found out people would die for a blue ribbon.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that with a college degree.
Yeah.
Like, okay, maybe it's right for some, but not for everyone, hopefully not for most. And I have a video coming on YouTube where I just say this whole, work hard, get good grades, go to college, get a good job, you'll end up with a pension. I'm like, you're not going to end up with that. And people are now finally believing it, but they're believing it with $250,000 of student loan debt. Oh,
it's brutal, man. And it's crazy. I went through it being a musician. My bachelor's degree is in songwriting, right? I'm out here, I invented these products and I do coaching and all this stuff. But at the time, I had probably 4 or 5 years of biochemistry study under my belt from guys like Rob. Rob's like, read this textbook. Like, nobody knows biochem like Rob. The dude is brilliant. So I'm like, I'm learning from him, same textbooks, everything. But I knew people wouldn't listen to me. So I went back to school 3 times to get 3 different credentials. And while going through the programs, explained to people how wrong all of this information was and why you're blindly trusting credentials because you don't want to trust a random musician from Nashville who studied biochemistry books by himself in his house. It's just like the value is ridiculously different because I didn't spend the 200 grand. Somehow I don't have the same knowledge. It's staggering.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think most of that is people, it's their own self limitations and self-limiting beliefs when they don't have a degree of some sort.
Right. I totally agree, man.
It's funny when people are like, well, do you live in New York City? I'm like, no, man, I probably think differently. Like, I had to look at this from a different perspective. They're like, what's your degree? And I'm like, finance. But it did, the thing that helped me was one professor, not my degree.
Yeah.
The thing that helped me was 26 straight months flying somewhere with a little red memo pad, asking questions and writing questions. And, it's like there's real world application to that. But I think your message of you got to be willing to invest in yourself, and you're worthy of it. And I think it's just easier to gamble on someone or something else. And when it doesn't work out, be able to place blame. It's harder to take responsibility.
Yeah.
I'm in the money world. I've lost money in real estate before. Sure, I've made money, but I've lost money. I've lost money in oil and gas. I've made and lost money on IPOs. I had a hard money lending fund that didn't do very well. Like, I did all these things because it was outside of my expertise, but it's what everybody was doing. And I was like, I'm going to just be an investor. And I did things that I hated and didn't enjoy because the early people I studied were all about just do this, that, and the other. And you know what? I was slopping my money around thinking I was really intelligent because for the first 8 years, it all worked out because of timing, not because of skill. And so I'm even more passionate about money and finance after going through those experiences. Admitting what I did was limited. And, I feel like Killing Sacred Cows was my first book because it was a confessional. Hey, man, here's the 9 mistakes that kicked my ass. I want to teach everyone else not to make them,
Yeah. And wisdom through experience is always so much more valuable. So the tricky part I see, I want to talk about debt because that's the number one thing that I got. The number one theme of all these questions is getting out of debt. And the scary thing there is wisdom through experience is huge. My very first business deal with Clovis, I lost multiple 6 figures. I got murdered. I don't talk about that a lot, but just because there was a lawsuit and all this craziness, right? It was awful. But I touched a very hot stove that I'll never touch again, the wisdom through experience. But that's the other thing I find is that people feel like they're so far gone. They've been burned by college. They've been burned by whatever, bad credit card debt. So these people that are in debt have this built-in excuse of yeah, Justin, yeah, Garrett, you guys can do this, but I'm still over here stuck in this debt. Now, your methods have been staggering to me in terms of how quickly you get people out of debt. So if someone is suffering from that debt and that's a big obstacle for them, where do you start with them?